Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Global Intelligence Update. As always, we've got a great guest with us, and we were just saying before we started this webinar that we can't believe it's almost middle of November. It's almost the end of the year. Wow, time really flies, and I think this is why we've got Hani here. She's got such a great topic that we're going to discuss, and let me just give you a quick overview of who is Hani in case you don't know. So Hani du Toit is the proudest South African entrepreneur, artist, and activist committed to the transformation of our society through amplifying the message of our shared humanity. In the world of growing polarity between people and its increasingly fragile planet, Hani advocates that only through conscious leadership and active citizenry can we bring about change that is sustainable, transformative, and grounded in our interconnectedness. Founder of We Belong Africa, Hani convenes courage conversations that give space for our human-ness with executive teams, academics, and within marginalized communities across Africa and Asia. She holds qualifications from UCT, UWC, Cambridge University, as well as the European Mentors and Coaches Council. She is the creator of the three powerful coaching tools, the HUMAN, Human Framework, and A to Z of co-creating belonging, and Cornerstones of Conversations and Connections. She has also published 3 children's books. Her latest book, Return of the Songbirds, invites children into important conversations on displacement, our impact on the environment, and the quest for belonging. What an introduction, Hani. Is there anything I missed on that?
No, thanks. That sums it up. Thank
Well,
you so much, Chris.
welcome, Hani, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. Lovely to see you on the call, whoever's there. I see Robin and Philippe, and I just want to say, I think that when the people who shared Bali are on a call, then there's like a special sense of like, I see people who I feel are my people, even if I haven't seen you in years. So that's what happens for me. So lovely, Rob and Philippe, to see you. And then, Karen, just to invite you to put your camera on. I know that's not the usual global update process, but we are going to do something a little different in this session. And when I spoke to Landi about doing this session, I said to her, listen, instead of a presentation or an interview, what if I actually gifted the Circle of Excellence members the opportunity to do what conscious leaders sometimes forget to do? And I said to Chris, it's kind of that thing of physician, heal thyself, where when we're, whatever game it is that we're in, it's easier to advocate than to take our own medicine. And so my intention with today is that whoever participates here gets the opportunity to slow down, to do some reflection on your own year, and to engage with each other on or from these cornerstones of conversation and connection. So let me give you a sense then of what do I mean when I say all of that. So I developed this tool, and it's actually in my background here, Cornerstones of Conversation and Connection. I'm excited about it. And Philippe, I don't know if you can remember, but like 6 years ago, I talked you through like my vision for it. I cannot believe it took me all of 6 years to physically have the box, the tin, all of it in my hands like this year now. But yes, it's finally here, including the crystals. And it's really making a difference with my clients. And so I thought I'd share that with you. And the intention is to get why the cornerstones of conversation for connection. When we talk about this, we've spoken about many pandemics in the last several years. And one of the pandemics that we don't speak about is the pandemic of disconnection. That there is an experience globally of disconnection. And the more we get sold on 5G connections and the AI connections and all the other connections, the more disconnected we become. Because what we're deeply seeking is a relational connection. And that connection that we're seeking, a lot of research shows, is over time, the loss that we've experienced as humanity of connecting first to self. So the loss of self is often the first loss that we encounter. And then we have a loss of, in losing ourselves, we have a loss of genuine and authentic relationship. So it's a loss of connection to others. And then there's the loss of connection to meaning. And of course, that's in a very dark downward spiral. So the work I do as an inclusion specialist is often to help people see where the disconnection has happened and how, when we are trapped in the cycles of commodifying everything, as unfortunately our global economy is structured to do, we don't notice that in our pursuit of success, we perpetuate disconnection. And so the invitation of the cornerstones of conversation and connection is to find ways to reconnect. So today's conversation is going to be very personal, actually, because you're going to get some quiet time to do some reflective writing yourself as we move through the cornerstones. And then you'll also get an opportunity in breakout rooms to connect with one or two other people and share reflection on that emerges from what you've written. So you don't ever have to share what you wrote, but just the reflection that emerges from what you've written. And I'm hoping that this process will give you the opportunity to have some perspective on your year. And given it is only the middle of November, ask yourself, what do you want to do in the 6 or 7 weeks that are left of the year to allow yourself to feel like the fulfillment and satisfaction that you've delivered to yourself and for your life, what it is that you wanted to create for yourself, and that you have a space you can hold for genuinely celebrating your wins. And for letting go of anything, any disappointment you may be holding on to. So that's the intention, and that's where that's the context of the process we're going to use. So I'm going to get into a bit of the presentation part of it now, and just invite you to be at ease, relax. We will get an opportunity to engage more personally, but really inviting you to stay present to the process for yourself. So thank you. Welcome to Caroline and Andrea and Karen, Rob, Philippe. And if anybody else joins, they'll simply join in and we'll find a way for them to engage us as we move. So, so yeah, the process that I use is called review to renew. So it's this question of looking back in order to look forward from a creative place and from a conscious and reflective space. So I said to you that it's based on this product which I've finally brought into the world, the Cornerstones of Conversation and Connection. And then the intention of the process. So really wanting us to be able to stand in a place where we take ownership for the results we've produced this year. That, and I say that both for all the successes and the stuff we sometimes overlook that is still a result we've produced. And so the taking ownership allows us to stand in celebration, because I think a big part of why we lose ourselves is we don't affirm ourselves sufficiently. We don't look at, wow, I actually did that thing, even though it was 6, 7 years ago that I said I was going to. It's finally in that stage. And what are the other things? And what are the relational results we've produced that we don't necessarily have a way to measure, but that is a victory nevertheless? And then the intention is also to be curious about what we're holding on to and what we could possibly release and make way for appreciation and celebration. Because sometimes when we're clutching onto disappointment or upset or resentment or frustration, then we don't have the open hand to receive what's possibly also available. And so we need to be conscious about what there is to release. And then to create a clearing and hold space for future possibilities, renewed intentions, renewed commitments. What could that be for you for 2025 or for whatever the next phase or season is that you're going into? And then the last part of our intention is to really honor ourselves as designers of the path we walk, that life's not just happening to us and for us, but we're actually really creative in how we actively or consciously or deliberately and intentionally walk the path that we want to walk as conscious leaders. So that's the intention for the process that we're using. And then just to give you some context for these cornerstones, the awareness of this, the context for the creation of this is the awareness that only when we're really conscious of the conversations we have, and when I say the conversations we have, I mean with ourselves first, because we're all running an inner conversation all the time, and then with others. So the whole question of mind mastery is how aware we are, how much we can cultivate the capacity to observe ourselves and our inner dialogue. And then how that leads to our conversation with others, co-creating our relationships and the outcomes that we want. And when we're conscious of that in conversation with others as well, then we really become pretty powerful. So we wanted to use the cornerstones to reflect on our year. And then, yeah, hopefully you get a sense also of what the offering of the cornerstones are beyond this process that I've decided to use it for. Because I'm finding that people really become engaged and connected because it pushes us to really connect with our humanity. So what are those 4 cornerstones that we're going to be reflecting from? So the first is we're going to be reflecting from holding space, that the awareness that we're always holding something. And if we're not conscious of holding something positive and powerful, like the space for connection or community, or belonging, or authenticity, if we're not conscious of that trust, then we become, then things become random. But when we are conscious, we can be more purpose-driven, we can be more inclusive, we could be more fair. And then the second cornerstone is releasing. And that looks at, so what must I let go of? We're holding on to something in any conversation, even with ourselves. Often it's judgment, bias, often it's an awareness of difference or comparison. And as an act of letting go, when we release these things, we become able to create a space to see and to hear and to imagine new possibilities. And it's that we want to be open for, because these new possibilities can be in our own accomplishments, or our own sense of self, our sense of confidence, but it can also be relational. The possibilities of a meaningful relationship, of deep connection, of trust where we didn't experience it before. And then the third cornerstone is listening. So we often reduce conversation to listening and speaking, or speaking first and then listening. And then the listening becomes very much a by the way thing, like I'm waiting to have my say or my turn. Whereas listening could be a creative act where we allow for the gift of listening, opens up the possibility of connection, of authentic self-expression, and of transformative interactions. So listening can be a very powerful way of engaging conversation. And then when we speak, and I've put that cornerstone last deliberately, because we so often make the mistake of thinking that speaking is about being articulate and it's about having the gift of the gab, when consciously speaking means I'm very intentional about whether I bring a lightness or a significance, a playfulness or a meaningfulness in order to create connection, or whether I'm going to be kind in my speaking. And so those are the 4 cornerstones we're going to be reflecting from. So let's start with holding and what we mean by holding. So my invitation to you is to have a pen and paper, because the process is about doing some reflective writing. And reflective writing is that space where, in the presence of a question, you allow your mind to just flow your responses onto the page and push yourself further and further to respond to that question. Leave some space, so maybe at another time you can revisit the question. And then I'll give you a second question before we go into a breakout room to just share your freshest thinking on it. So what do we mean by holding? The holding of space for something, when I do this consciously, I am assured that what I'm holding space for will show up. So there's a trust present in that. And I create a clearing that in every conversation, I can be in a state of discovery. I don't have to be referencing the past. I don't have to be preempting what somebody's going to say. I could be curious. I could hold the lightness of being, and that includes playfulness and humor. I could be intentional and hold space for this being purposeful, or that trust will show up and emerge from the engagement. But all of these elements can elevate the quality of the conversation I have. So this is the quality of the conversation I have with myself as well as with others. And it can enhance our focus and our consciousness of the people we engage with. So then the questions that I have for you in this, around this cornerstone, as you reflect on the year behind you, what did you consciously hold space for that enabled the success you attained this year? So maybe you want to reflect on your successes. What were some of the wins? And what did you consciously hold space for? So I'm going to give you a minute or two to just write your response. And allow your responses to just flow onto the page. And maybe as you first note some of those successes, that helps you to notice what you held space for. And the next question, what else would you have liked to hold space for, but you did not actively do so? So if you consider your answers in number one, you may notice that there may have been other things you hoped to fulfill on or accomplish or act on. And perhaps there wasn't an intention to hold space for that. What would you have liked to hold space for, but did not actively do so? Right. So now that you've done that reflection for yourself or by yourself, I'm going to invite you to, Chris is going to open breakout rooms and you're going to go into a page sharing. And the question that I have for you in that page sharing is, what awareness do you want to bring to what you hold space for as you look to the year or the chapter ahead? So I'm going to put that question in the chat box. Okay, so it's in the chat box. And we're going to, give you an opportunity to share your thoughts on that with someone else in a breakout room. Welcome, Bevan. So lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for that gift of shoving me in a breakout group. And it allowed me to also get a sense of connecting instead of, because the presenting part can also be a disconnection. And so just getting to be in a space, and that's so lovely about the virtual space. It can be so intimate. So thank you for engaging the reflection. I'm going to have us move on so we can have a few more minutes of group discussion at the end. So let's get into the next cornerstone. And the next cornerstone is about releasing. And this is again just presencing ourselves to the act of letting go. And that open hand that I spoke about earlier on, it allows us an open hand, but letting go also allows for an open heart and an open mind. So we don't oppress ourselves with the thinking of our attachment. It creates space and it allows us to see and hear and imagine new ideas, new possibilities, fresh perspectives, maybe new ways of relating to ourselves and others. Our past experiences, hurts and disappointments, our cynicism gets in the way of us being with others, of us being in connection. And so we do need to be conscious of, reflective about, what can I release? What do I need to let go more of? And so if there are particular things where you feel confronted at the moment or challenged, maybe bring those things to mind to identify your willingness to release your expectations or fears or judgments or anxieties, even hopefulness. When we release those things, we create space for being present. And I love what Thomas Hubel says, that the power to be present is one of the human superpowers. And the second superpower, when we activate presence, is the relational connection in the presence of presence. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing, that most of our best ideas have happened when there's been a deep connection, whether that's to the essence of oneself or to in relation with others. So with this presence and presencing ourselves, we want to be fully here and now so we can create the next moment. And then we can engage with reality. We can engage with reality as it unfolds instead of trying to control and steer and manipulate. And then we're also creating free from the constraints of the past because we've allowed ourselves to let certain things go. So let's look at those reflective questions. And the first one is, what would you like to release more often that may have enhanced your relationship? So what would you have liked to release more often? Looking back, what would you have liked to release more often that may have enhanced your relationships and your experience of the year? What would you have liked to let go of more frequently that would have given you maybe deeper connection in your relationships or a more pleasant experience of the year? Where did you notice you drove your own angst or your own stress? And the next question, what do you consciously release now that could contribute to you closing the year powerfully? What do you consciously release now that could contribute to you closing the year powerfully? And if there are any should-haves or could-haves creeping in, you just may want to release those as well. So now you're going to get an opportunity in your breakout room for just 3 minutes. What could releasing self-judgment and criticism make space for as you close the year? What could releasing self-judgment and criticism make space for as you close the year? And I'll put that in the chat. Okay, Chris, can you open the breakout rooms for 3 minutes? Thanks. So let's move on. And the third cornerstone is listening. And here we spoke about listening as an action and listening as a creative act, and just noticing that the listener plays a role in bringing meaning to what is said. So even if someone else is saying it, how we listen actually creates the meaning. And so when we focus our listening from a context that's mindful, that it's a gift, then we give attention to the person who's speaking, then we really open something up in the conversation that allows us our humanity to rise and allows for that higher consciousness to be in conversation and to shift something in our relationship. And so we want to look at the possibility for real connection and authentic expression and transformational interactions, starting with how we listen. But all of these qualities of listening can be brought to our own thinking because we are listening to our own thoughts. And so I just want us to presence ourselves to, as we are thinking, we are also listening, and we don't often slow down enough to hear our own inner dialogue. And so that's what this part of the conversation is about, given that we're doing it for ourselves. So the reflective question that we've got over here is, what qualities did you bring to your listening that positively contributed to your relationships and your world? What qualities did you bring to your listening that positively contributed to your relationships and your world? In the card deck, there are many different places that you can bring to your listening: openness, stillness, generosity, trust, commitment. Listen for gold. What qualities did you bring to your listening that positively contributed to your relationships and your world? And the next question, what else could you bring to your listening that could shift what must still shift before closing the year? What else could you bring to the way that you listen that could shift what must still shift before closing the year? Here's the reflective question for this part of our conversation. What do you notice about listening as a creative act? What do you notice about listening as a creative act? So something shows up in the space of our listening. So we're going to put that question in the chat and then go into our breakout rooms. And I noticed that Chris is shifting our rooms for us. So Chris, can you put that in the chat for me? Because I'm just struggling to find my chat box all of a sudden. Thanks. So if we can go into our breakout, and this time you've got 2 minutes. The connection's building in the room, so we're going to go 2 minutes, but we also want to be able to come back and do the last cornerstone and an open round. I was just saying to Rob, when we're unfamiliar with reflecting on our conversations in this maybe analytical way, then it can seem a bit bizarre, strange, weird. Listening is creative act when we usually receive when we listen. But I designed this particular stack out of a challenge to listen from stillness some years ago, about 8 years ago, and discovering I can't listen from stillness. There's so much going on in my head. It's never quiet. And so cultivating the practice to quiet my head, to quiet my mind, and be in a conversation and be surprised by what could arise, become something beautiful and maybe creative. So let's look at the next cornerstone, which is the cornerstone of speaking, and this opportunity to understand that it goes beyond our ability to say what we feel and what we mean, but that we actually have the power to create worlds for others in the words that we use. And so when we're mindful of that, we play a powerful role in conjuring images and emotions and experiences for others. Then we would understand that we need to be present to that power. And the voice we use, the energy we use in our engagements, and the impact we will have. So whether you see yourself as an introvert or an extrovert isn't as important as, do you use your opportunities to engage and to speak and to express with consciousness, with intention, because then it becomes something invaluable. And when we speak with that consciousness, we can be inclusive, we can be fair, we can be considered, light, playful, meaningful, we can really experience our connection. So the reflective question for speaking is, what are you celebrating that you've spoken into existence this past year? And this is about getting present to the power of our declaration, our intention. What are you celebrating that you've spoken into existence this past year? And the next question asks you to look at what ruptures and repairs you could address with more kind and compassionate speaking. So in our relationships, we all experience ruptures and repairs. And which of them could you address with more kind and compassionate speaking? And now for the last round, we're not going to go into breakouts. We're actually going to keep it in the in the plenary. In the year ahead, if you committed to conversations that co-create connection and belonging, what would you shift in what you hold space for, what you mindfully release, the context of your listening, and the quality of your speaking? So what consciousness, what greater awareness would you bring to these cornerstones of conversation and connection as you look to the year ahead? And so I'm going to invite anybody to share what's there for you around that as we close.
Can we put the question in the chat,
Let's do that.
please? That was a big question.
It was a big question. And I'm going to repeat it so that you can hold it while I'm putting it in the chat. If you committed to conversations that co-create connection and belonging, what would you shift in what you hold space for, what you mindfully release, the context of your listening, and the quality of your speaking?
I would, I'll kick off.
Thanks.
I'm actually in the process of shifting connections and relationships that that are no longer a necessary part of who I was, and not necessarily a part of where I'm going. And in releasing those connections and those relationships provides an opportunity for space and space for other amazing relationships and connections. And that's one of the experiences I had at the recent business Bali school in September. Was I released a relationship. Probably wasn't the best way to do it, but it just was. It probably not the best way for them, but for me it was. That's just the way it had to go. And in releasing that, it created an incredible, amazing space for me to connect in with. I found my twin, who happens to be in South Africa. She's blonde, blue-eyed, and but she's my sister, she's my sister. So yeah, I think you've got to, I feel that that's what I would shift more of, is relationships and connections, and move more towards holding space insofar as honoring space and allowing more space to be created.
Lovely. Anyone else? And it can be a response to any one of those. It doesn't have to be all of them.
It's interesting, Andrea, because I'm blonde and blue-eyed, but I'm in South Africa, but I don't believe it's me. You didn't pick me.
Not yet. I mean, we could
but,
be sisters from another mister. It's all good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I've had a very similar experience, actually, because this year was also a release of two people in my life who I thought were friends, and I needed to get rid of that, and they were part of my business. And it was amazing that when I did release them, everything just went boom. And I also got I already had she calls herself my daughter, and she's not blonde or blue-eyed. In fact, she's Muslim. But it's amazing how releasing that negative energy created this incredible positive energy, and how the synergy between Nazneen and I has just exploded as a result of releasing that. So yeah, similar experience.
We need to shed. It's a seasonal thing. You need to know what to shed. And the reflection helps for that. And I think that was the intention today. So I know we're on 10 and on the hour, and everybody's got their next meetings and their next go-to. But thank you for participating in the reflection. I certainly hope that for people who are online who get to watch this, that they give themselves the space and the time maybe to even revisit the questions and give more time for it. But just to give a sense of the places that we can be standing to do a review, to renew perspective shift and renew our intentions. It was lovely being with all of you. Chris, thank you so much for operating the tech in the background and for holding the space for the conversation.
It's all a pleasure, Hani, and thank you for joining us. Really informative and insightful session, really. And I just want to thank everyone that's here on the live call as well, and those that are listening offline. You guys are going to have a kicker of a session on this one, so just to allow the questions to guide you, like Hani said. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great weekend ahead. So just again, thank you, Hani. Thanks everyone that's online. I hope you have a great week. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Andrea.